Welcome to the Unfettered Speech Podcast. I'm Patrick Sullivan.
Hi, I'm Luis Diaz-Perez.
Luis, great to see you. And we've got a great guest today. I'm really excited to have her.
Yeah, as am I. We're really honored to have retired Lieutenant Colonel Karen Kwiatkowski, former veteran of the U.S. Air Force and of the U.S. National Security Establishment, and is really one of our country's leading voices for reform in the area of national security and foreign policy, and really a very astute critic otherwise of American public life. And it's going to be a great conversation with her.
Well, thanks.
Karen. Thanks for coming on, Karen. Good to see you.
Yeah, great to be here. I appreciate you inviting me on. Looking forward to it.
Oh, we're really happy to have you. And it's a great way for us to close out the year and be able to go over the kind of terrain that we can with you today. So thank you for being with us. So here we are in the closing moments of 2025. And I think the first question I have for you is, does the end of 2025 look like you would have expected it to 12 months ago?
I don't think so. I don't think it does. We had the new president come in, Trump, and Trump ran on some things that gave me some hope, really. I mean, he didn't want to intervene. He wanted to rebuild America's core, whether it was our health system or taking care of our people, helping our economy, things like that. I mean, it sounded pretty positive and it sounded different to me. Particularly, he was going to bring troops home. And that was something I thought he really would do, because when he tried to do it his first term, bringing troops home from Syria, we didn't have a huge amount there, but we had some, and he said we should bring them home from Syria 2018, 2019. And he was lied to by his Secretary of Defense, who said, oh yeah, just tell them we're bringing them home, but we're really not. And he was insulted and angered by that when he found out. So I thought that the second Trump administration would really deliver on things like bringing troops home, shifting our unipolar world dominance theme. And I thought he would pay more attention to what is important to Americans, whether it was the ones that voted for him or, the other ones. I mean, Americans, we're all together. We need to be taken care of. Our country, we should have our values taken care of, liberty, freedom, all these things. So I think my expectations would have been that by this time, 12 months later or whatever, we would not be talking about limits on free speech. We would not have fought a war or dropped bombs on Iran at the behest or in cooperation with Israel. I would have thought, not knowing any better, I would have thought that part of our non-intervention approach would have been we would have not continue to fund the genocide in Gaza. I would have thought, well, that fits in, to do that is to intervene abroad. And Trump said he didn't like that when he was a candidate. But of course, so I had some expectations like that. And he did talk about tariffs, and I didn't think about it too critically, other than I don't like them. But the way he instituted tariffs was really unexpected. I mean, in the sense that he would announce them, and then he'd pull them back, and then he would change them, and then he would get mad at somebody and double them, very random almost, very emotional, reactive type of an approach. And that's surprising. And of course, the Congress doing nothing, that's kind of to be expected. But I hoped maybe that we would have a Congress, being that, Republicans, they would do Republican things. They would stand up for the Constitution, at least in my imagination. But of course, the Congress was worse, even worse than it had been under Biden, just rotten. So doing nothing, they could care less about their role. The Article 1 is the most important article of the first three in the Constitution. And the reason is the Congress is supposed to embody the voices of the people, whether that's the voices of the states, the Senate, or the voices of the people themselves through the representatives. So you would have thought they might have rediscovered that, given that, there was an election, a lot of people showed up, and it seemed like, you know, Constitution, good government, putting America first is popular. They did none of that. They did none of that. So that surprised me a little bit, but that's just my own gullibility. I shouldn't have been surprised about that. But what we have seen that's different is, of course, the lies that Trump's. I mean, if you really wonder where he gets his information, because the things that he says, uh, it doesn't matter if it's overseas foreign relations, but he says there's no inflation. He's brought inflation down, and that there is none. And most Americans I know who shop at grocery stores or Walmart or places like that for their things they want, I mean, they're feeling an incredible pressure, and they're noticing it, and they're remembering even from earlier in the year and looking at prices, and they're not saying what Trump is saying. Trump's saying, oh, prices have gone down, everything's much cheaper. Oh, look at gas, your gas has gone down. This does not translate. So I don't know where he's getting his information from. There's that. Then there's the aggressiveness that Trump shows, which again, he was aggressively self-protective and self-promoting during his campaigns, and even the last, and that's Trump. That's Trump's personality, self-aggrandizement. It's very entertaining. His whole YMCA act, and that kind of thing. I mean, he's just and people like that. A lot of people liked it. Some people, of course, despised it, but I didn't realize that was part of who he is, and it's not an act, because he is about self-aggrandizement, and he's about his new office is not about all the people that voted for him or the country that he claims that he loves and puts first. It's really just about his friends and how he feels about himself, and he doesn't like to be insulted. And I guess in my imagination, once you're elected at that level, you shouldn't really care if you're insulted. Obviously, if you're doing bad things and you have a disagreement with somebody, that's one thing. But he is the same person he was really 20 years ago. I mean, he thinks I'm just a regular person. Well, you have to behave a certain way as president. It's an office. You are the caretaker. You sit there and you caretake the country in theory, for 4 years. But with Trump, the state is him. It's like the French thing. What is it? L'état c'est moi. Yeah, he's he feels like he is the state. So whatever he does is sanctioned by the state, and whatever he doesn't like, the state must sanction it. He's his going after free speech in universities, certainly relating to Gaza. Anybody anyone who says speech that Netanyahu doesn't like, it's a phone call from somebody, and Trump all of a sudden is like, oh, this is not allowed. What do you mean this is not allowed? You're the president of a country. You ran for president 3 times. You won twice. You love this country. You're 78 years old, whatever. You should understand what makes America America. And it's not just the dollars. It is these ideas that we cherish, and it's our Constitution and natural rights that we say we protect. But he has no concept of that, so he goes after it, and that surprised me that he would be so, kicking people out of the country because, I think the one student, I forget what university it was at, but it was a year old op-ed she had written that was so reasonable. It was remarkably reasonable. I mean, it wasn't even hostile. It was just putting together some thoughts condemning what Israel was doing. It was a year old, and that was caused to try to get her kicked out of the country, I think. And of course, it happened to other folks too.
That was the Columbia University graduate.
I think that one was from Tufts. There was a
Tufts. The Tufts one was a year old. Yeah. And there was another case here in Richmond. I don't know if it was the University of Richmond or Virginia. Anyway, it's in the town of Richmond State University, and they had a person who they denied her. She went to a protest or a demonstration of some sort, what a lot of people did in Richmond. She went there, stood for, free Palestine or whatever. And They would not give her diploma. Now, this is Virginia. This is not a federal university. It was a state of Virginia university. They delayed her diploma almost 6 months. I think she was supposed to graduate in May, and they withheld it for the reason and they told her why. They said, well, you were at a, you were protesting.
And as you say, not only the steward of the country, but someone who was personally persecuted before
right.
he was elected, whose
That's right.
supporters were persecuted, censored, their online speech was violated by the federal government. And then he made a statement early on, and I was hopeful too, as it sounds like you were. It was about this time last year, I think, where you put out those little shorts and say, in my administration, here's what's going to happen. And
Yeah.
one was about free speech, and it's like free speech is coming back. And then he starts doing this and has trots out Marco Rubio to say, well, of course we, throw people out if they're un-American or whatever. And it's just like, it's like obvious that one would do this.
Yeah,
When
it doesn't.
his own supporters suffered from the last administration's.
That's right. That's right. And he's. I was surprised also about the Jeffrey Epstein turnaround. That was very politically not very smart. That was politically stupid because he ran on that for hammered it at all of his rallies, and then all of a sudden he said, "Oh well, not a problem." And then all you MAGA people who voted for me and cheered me on as I complained about it and said what I was going to do, and you were happy. You're just a bunch of idiots. Who does that to their voters? I mean, it's
Right.
just, and maybe it means that he's not a politician, that he really isn't. He's certainly not a standard politician. But anyway, yeah, because he's not a politician, I think I expected things to go a little bit better. But he surrounded himself with Zionists who put Israel first, and it doesn't, not Israel really, because Israel's policies are sinking that country. I mean, it's the things that they're doing are not good for Israel. You kill all you decide to slaughter half your population, make war with every neighbor you can think of for no reason, lie about everything, do assassinations around. That's not good for your country to do that. That is a count. Nobody trusts Israel. There's a global, the global divestment and boycott type operation that doesn't go away. Once somebody decides they're not buying Israeli products, they don't switch back. Oh, I think I will now. No, you don't. You just, this human nature is you're going to stick on that path. And what they've done to Gaza, which has been broadcasting 24/7 to anybody who cared to look at it, which was most of the world, not so much Americans, but most of the whole world has been watching this. That is appalling. And it's an example of a government that's run amok, which is the same thing I think many people see when they look at Washington. They look at Trump, a government run amok. So that's very disheartening. That surprised me. I didn't realize, because I'm not from New York, and I'm from the South. I don't think I met a Jewish person until I was in college, and I certainly didn't understand what Zionism was until I was in the Pentagon trying to, I had some of my experiences in the Pentagon were very educational about how certain of our allies kind of do what they wish. And so I had to learn a little bit about, well, what is that about? Where does that come from? But that was an adult learning experience. I never really had those opinions or whatever, but so I didn't, and I still don't really. So I was surprised that Trump is such a Zionist. I didn't think of him. I really thought he put America first. And what surprised me is he doesn't. He doesn't put America first. He puts Trump first. He puts Israel first or second. And maybe possibly the rest of the country a far behind third.
Well, there's a through line maybe running through all modern politics where people just say things that are demonstrably untrue and expect you to believe them, right? Whether it's, gas prices are going up in Europe because of Putin somehow. It has nothing to do with the fact that we blew up our own pipeline and then sanctioned Russian energy. It's going up for, Putin, because of Putin. Everybody knows that's not true. Or as you say, inflation. Don't believe your lying eyes. Believe me that inflation's up. And we had two presidents say that exact same thing, because Biden used to say it. All Biden's minions would say that.
Yes,
Actually, the price of things are down, and people would be like, no, they're not. And it's the same thing now. So it's like, how do people think that works? But, or I'm going to go after Jeffrey Epstein, and then you have that deer in the headlights interview with Bongino and Patel, where they say, no, there's nothing there. I don't know what you're talking about. Where they're beating their chest, saying 2 weeks prior,
I
saying that
know.
they're
That's huge. I mean, because so many people watch Bongino's show, and he was good. And I think he's quitting now. He's ending his term, is what I heard. And maybe he'll go back to being a podcaster. He was good at that. People like to listen to him. But yeah, it's almost like well, we used to say this in the military back in the day, that before they would pin a star on somebody's shoulder, make them a general or an admiral, they would have to go through the general's lobotomy. And once they successfully went through that and survived the operation, they would be made a general. And I think with our political appointees, you see it with certainly with Bongino. I mean, he was very outspoken, and Kash Patel, I didn't follow that closely. He said a lot of strong things too, and then immediately folded as soon as he was in the administration. But Tulsi Gabbard hasn't done that.
right.
Tulsi
She
Gabbard
has
has
not.
not done that.
Right, but she stayed very quiet in the meantime. But I think with Kash Patel, I in particular was shocked that, or I had sort of the greatest expectations that he'd be one of the strongest agents of reform.
Yeah.
Given sort of his record on that Nunes committee in Congress, and the things that the public statements he had made, and I had seen a lot of the promotions he had done for his book, and it seemed like he was loaded for bear to
Yeah.
clean things up. He even talked about blowing up the Hoover building and starting the FBI from scratch.
He
And
did,
it
yeah.
was all that kind of rhetoric, but there was zero follow-up.
Yeah.
I'm interested in asking you a little bit about last week. We had a presidential address to the nation. I think it was the first one that Trump had set up, and a lot of the scuttle ahead of time was, oh, this is going to be the announcement of a major operation against Venezuela, and
Yeah.
we were going to get some clarity around this. And instead, we got 20 minutes of one of the most eccentric political talks that I've ever seen, and particularly on that stage. I mean, to have gone from, say, Roosevelt's fireside chats to everything that the way you described Trump was sort of encapsulated in those 20 minutes. It was this self-aggrandizing pile of lies for the most part, particularly starting with the whole affordability question, which he used in his campaign, and then said, nobody ever talked about affordability. Why am I hearing about it now? Then he had to be reminded, well, you campaigned on it, right? And then I guess he tried to clean that up in that speech. What was your take on it? I mean, I actually watched it live, and it was some of the worst spent 20 minutes of my life.
Yeah, I have to admit, I did not watch it. I did not watch it, and I didn't even watch a replay of it. I heard some of the stories that he told, but what did stand out is he didn't announce some sort of attack, or he's already attacking Venezuela, but he didn't announce the war. And I thought, I'll tell you what I thought, that he didn't do the one thing that was kind of hyped out there, because even Tucker was saying that, and people were saying that, and I think he played the American people, or at least those that will watch a presidential address, which isn't everybody. I think he played them a little bit to get them there so he could boast about himself, because he really is going to be in big trouble if he declares a war. I know that the Congress is rolling over on this, but this would destroy his legacy. And maybe that 1 year end of year speech was about prepping his legacy, and how great he is, how all these things he solved, all these all these peace things that he's done, which he hasn't done. Okay. And they're not peace, that nobody has peace. I mean, even the Cambodian Thai thing blew up. Everything, it's like, a Band-Aid is not peace, and it's not even a Band-Aid. It's just a verbal Band-Aid. So, but he's boasting about all these things. Like, this is his legacy. But the real legacy that he will have is if there's a nuclear incident anywhere in the world that can be related to something he's done or said, or one of his allies, that will be his legacy. And the other legacy will be if he engages in a major war that is impossible to win, even though the enemy in this case would be Venezuela, which you would think, oh, well, that should be so easy. That should be so easy, right? Well, first off, the other legacy that he has, and it's not necessarily his, it's an impossible problem, but that is the state of our military. First off, we don't have a defensive military. Haven't had one since, I don't know if we've ever had one, not in the 20th century. We don't have we have an offensive military. And you can say, well, number one, unipolar world, we have to be, we have to go places and do things. Okay. Except we can't go places, and we can't stay places, and we can't operate for very long overseas, and we can't do things. I mean, we couldn't even, our US Navy with air support could not do a thing in the Red Sea to stop the Houthis from disrupting and controlling the sea lanes there. So they put a name on the operation, and he fussed around for 2 or 3 months, and turns out that was costing a lot of money, and we were not prevailing. So he says, okay, declare victory and leave. And that's good. He shouldn't have been there. It's not our problem. It's a problem that we shouldn't be paying for Israel's mistakes. Israel should suffer from their mistakes, and that's how a country will learn. That's how governments learn. That's how people learn. But instead, so he tried to help Israel and clear operations there in the Red Sea. He could not do it. Our capability was so expensive and so rarefied and so precious that we couldn't do a thing against people that were using modern technology and that were defending what they believed in, something they believed in. Because, spirit is a big part of winning a battle. A lot of times you don't really have to be the best, but you have to want it worse than the other guy. And but he pulled out of there. Trump ended that, which was a good thing. We shouldn't have people over there. Of course, then you remember that we're bombing Somalia every single day of the year, which is just a little farther south from where we were operating in the Red Sea.
And arming arming Israel against Syria as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Doing all these things. So Trump really has not been true to his word there. But in the failure of the Red Sea operation that we spearheaded for a couple, 3 months, it really illustrated the lack of capability that the U.S. Navy has. We have the F-35, of course, has long been spoken. Anybody who looks at that, there's a huge cost overruns. It's a very precious aircraft. It's 35% of the time operational, 65% of the time either non-operational or in some sort of maintenance. Can't fly it. Well, it can fly in the weather, but it's not its strongest its stealth capability disappears. So all these things very, very expensive. We're trying to sell it to everybody, and we of course Israel has their version of the F-35, but that has not been a very capable example of American air power. So there's that. So the Navy not doing too good. And then, of course, carriers, as soon as hypersonics became a thing that we could talk about, and we don't have them in the United States. We've been trying to build them for years and years, can't do it, can't get out of the test phase. But meanwhile, Russia, of course, can do it, and so can China. So these are our two big enemies, and they've got hypersonics. Well, a hypersonic missile, they can launch from any different various platforms. I mean, that's a carrier killer. Okay. And we've long wondered, I mean, everybody who thinks about it seriously wonders when will we lose a carrier? And it could happen at any time. We could lose 2 or 3 at the same time. It's just that they're that vulnerable. And yet we've built our whole global naval operations concept on that, which is an obsolete concept. So our fighter aircraft, obsolete, naval stuff, obsolete. The Army, I wasn't in the Army, I wasn't in the Navy either, but the Army has always had kind of a recruitment problem. But for us to fight anything with actual Army guys, which is what you would think, even though we're high tech, sure, we can do a lot of things high tech, but you also need people. Our people are not of supreme or superior quality. They're not highly trained. They're not reliable. For many, many years in the all-volunteer force, every year we could get fewer and fewer volunteers. They're not motivated, which is good because they're not defending anything. See, this is the natural response of having an offensive army. I want to defend America. Well, where are you going to go? Well, they used to go to the Guard, but then we started sending the Guard over to these things. So now they don't want to go to the Guard either. But our government doesn't offer people that want to defend this country a place to go and defend this country. This like they say their grandparents did or their parents did. Now it's like, well, that's not a good idea. We're not going to do that. And those that do go into the military at the enlisted level, particularly in the Army, are people that really need jobs. And this is a normal thing that we always see when jobs are not as easily accessible. We see a little bit of increased numbers into the military. Anyway, we're not winning on any aspect of our military. That whole thing needs to be redone. Trump actually said he would do things like that. But he didn't do anything. First off, he gave him $1 trillion or more, and that's just the baseline for this year. He's got 3 more years of pushing more money into the Pentagon. But with that, he didn't defund any of the old systems. It's all additive. It's like, well, keep doing everything you're doing. Let's build a bunch of more F-35s, which is a huge mistake because we can make money selling them, which is another huge mistake. That has nothing to do with defense. That's just a financial decision, a government subsidized financial decisions, which is the worst kind. So, but that's what he's doing. Same old stuff, and then he's got these ideas. And I don't know if in his speech he announced his new Trump class battleship. Was that in the speech?
No, that wasn't. But
That came later.
soon to come, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah, but this kind of thing is just totally superficial,
Yeah.
nutty. It doesn't solve the problem. We have real problems if you want to defend this country. We wouldn't need to defend this country if we didn't screw around with everybody and make them want to, get even. Like, taking the tanker. He took Chinese oil. Chinese paid for Venezuelan oil, and he took it, and they said, "What are you going to do with it?" And he said, "I'll put it in my natural, my national reserve. Maybe I'll sell it." It's like, dude.
And keep the ship. And we're going to keep the ship. Oh, no, it's unbelievable. Now, there is a country out there where the military does apparently have a very strong esprit de corps, where they do feel like they're fighting for something worth defending. And I'm curious curious about your answer to the question: is the Ukraine-Russia war at the end of December 2025 where you would have expected it to be a year ago? Or has Russia slowed down in its advances?
Yeah.
How do you assess the strategy of the war of attrition? And where do you see this in the first half of 2026?
I honestly thought that the special military operation objectives that Putin talked about, and those haven't changed in 4 years. They haven't changed. Same ones. I thought that those objectives would have been reached sooner, and I thought that war would have been over a couple years ago. And I wrote, you can check my writing. That was what I thought would happen, and I was wrong about that. It didn't happen that way. I'm very surprised how much the EU and NATO countries, at least France and Great Britain and Germany, I'm very surprised at how aggressively they are lobbying to continue this war when they've been losing it really from day one. And but they still want more Ukrainians to die, and they want, in the name, I guess, of killing Russians. But if you want to kill Russians, because I think the Europeans, the elite leadership in Europe wants to kill Russians. And okay, let's say that you want to kill Russians. Well, do you have a track record in doing that in Ukraine? Can you do that? Well, they've never, the numbers, it's 20 to 1. 20 Ukrainians die for every Russian they get, or every, North Korean they get, or whatever. That ratio is not a winning ratio. So what they're doing is they're slaughtering Ukrainians. They're destroying Ukraine. They're slaughtering Ukrainians who are unlucky enough to get dragged into war. And of course, dragging them into the war is what we are. We actually see them being physically dragged,
Right.
Off the street, out of cars, and thrown into vans, take them to the front with no training, which of course leads to their death in much higher percentages than it would otherwise. And so I can see, okay, European crazy people that run the EU and NATO, you want to kill Russians. Can you think of a better way to do it? Because you're not doing it with what. So either this isn't about really killing Russians. It is about destroying Ukraine. It's about selling weapons to Ukraine. It's about the financial shell game that goes on in justifying that. It's about their political survival, because all three of those countries all have strong populist nationalist movements that really would be in charge of those countries if they hadn't been manipulated by their own capitals. I mean, this they're very afraid of losing political power, which again I don't understand that, and it may be because I'm not a politician, but those parliamentary systems, there's room for a lot of people. Maybe you're not on top, but most of those guys could still even stay in the government in some form. I mean, they could still have elite influence and power, and yet they're so afraid. So I don't know what is driving them, but their strategy to kill Russians never worked from day one in Ukraine. It only killed Ukrainians. It only destroyed Ukraine. It only created on the Europe's eastern border a country that is not just impoverished and more corrupt than it ever was before, and it was always corrupt in Ukraine. It was always that way. It's more corrupt now, but also one that has been decimated of working people. For every soldier that's killed, you've got his younger brother and his wife and his mother, who all left the country. Most of those are not coming back to rebuild Ukraine. So, what is it that Europe wanted? Now, my opinion, really, when I think of it just logically, what do they want? I think I know one thing they want, and that's what we were using Ukraine for before the war. And the Russians have said this, and it's true. We were using Ukraine as kind of a test field, and not just for bio warfare. That's one little kind of bio warfare, sure. Well, we were doing that, but we're also we can't our search for bombing ranges and things that we practice our legacy equipment on, and it's all legacy, which is what makes this such a joke. I mean, but bombing ranges is one example, and also places where you can run large 20th century style integrated battlefield games, war games, exercises. Well, when even 25 years ago in the military, we were searching for places to drop bombs for practice, and Tunisia, Morocco, anything but Europe, because the Europeans didn't want that. The Europeans were tired. Germans in particular were like, please go home. We do not need you here with your tanks, driving through our cobblestone streets. We're just sick of it. Go. We don't need it. And it was the same thing, like not in my backyard, the NIMBY thing that we have with AI centers and solar farms and things like that. The idea, we don't want a test range for NATO in our backyard. So there was a constant search, where's a convenient, cost-effective place to do it? And I think Ukraine was one of those, because if you look at the central part of Ukraine, it's like plains. It's like Nevada. It's not really like Nevada. I mean, it's not, the temperature's not the same, but the weather's not the same. But it's flat, and a nice flat or rolling space like that with not a lot of people. That's the kind of place that the governments like to come in and drop bombs for practice, and run exercises and things. So I think part of it was just the survival of NATO. NATO can't exist if it can't practice, and it's useless anyway, even if it does practice. I mean, I've worked with NATO, and it's either US with NATO or US without NATO, and nobody can tell the difference. I'm sorry, I don't mean to insult them, but I am going to insult them. And for the Americans, what do we like about NATO? That they buy our weapon systems, and what has Trump done? Now, this was predictable. Kind of pushed them to buy more and more of our stuff, less and less of their own stuff, which of course is not popular in their own countries, because that's not putting Germany first. That's not putting France first. That's they have the ability to defend themselves. But yeah, he's selling weapons to there. So
NATO's not an alliance; it's a business, right? And the business is selling arms. So if you're a business, who can you sell to? You can either sell to your existing customers or you find new customers. So in the past 20 years, they've been looking for new customers, and Ukraine was a big one, right?
That's
so
right.
they can do seller financing, and steal some of it.
Yes, absolutely.
And so at the end of the day,
that's the operation. And for people in that operation, it's profitable. It's profitable, and you can make it look like you're doing something defensive. But of course, you have to have a nice, evil communist Soviet Union kind of thing going on, which we haven't had since '89. So
they work on it with the terrorism. But my question then is, what do we have? What are we going to have on the market that is going to interest other foreign militaries if, in fact, we're seeing Russian materiel is far
Yeah.
more advanced than what we're putting out on the battlefield with Ukraine. They've got systems that I think are our planners' dreams at this
Mhm.
point. And layer on top of that the scarcity, at least for American buyers, of the kind of strategic materials that are needed to produce
Yeah.
a lot of the new weapon systems, as well as sort of the high tech equipment that goes into it.
Yeah.
So, our only source for a lot of that is China,
Hmm.
who our national security thinkers would have us position as our chief adversary at the same time.
Yeah.
Help me square that circle.
It's that you can't square it. What it is that it's the end of an era. It's what it is. It's over for our defense establishment. They have not miniaturized. They have not made their equipment and their systems competitive. They have not made them affordable, and they have no production capacity. So they haven't scaled to any type of productive relevance in a global market. So what's happening, and we're already seeing this happen. Trump can't do anything about it. This isn't even about Trump. I mean, it's about America's evolution or failure
Mm-hmm.
to evolve properly, competitively with our military exports, which we still do. 47%, I think they say, of the world's weapons come from the U.S. But that number it continued to shrink and shrink. Because think about it, if you have money in your country and you have a president, and all presidents, they want to have something that's powerful. They want a missile, they want an aircraft, they want a kind of a naval protection for their waters, whatever it is. You're going to want to buy it cost effectively. You're going to want to get top of the line technology. You're going to want to buy it from somebody who's going to be around producing it, so that if I buy one squadron, but maybe I really like it, I want two more. Can I get two more? Like 2 or 3 months later or whatever. And if you want those things, you're going to say, well, it's Russia, China, or India, because those are the only guys that can produce the stuff that we're talking about with the technology that is present day technology. And I say present day because to Americans, we see nuclear icebreakers that Russia has been building for years.
Yeah.
And we go, oh, wow, nobody else has nuclear icebreakers that can do ice breaking in the Arctic like Russia. And they've been building them for a long time and working on that. We have the Oreshnik, the hypersonic missiles with just all kinds of variations and nuclear. And then the other one that that we just found out about, which is a nuclear powered conventional torpedo. Yeah, well, torpedo or missile or ballistic missile, but its energy comes from it carries its own mini nuclear reactor with it. So technically it is a nuclear weapon, but not much of that would contaminate its main. It's like a conventional with a nuclear powered conventional weapon. Anyway, we don't have anything like that. We're not even thinking like that. And these kinds of weapons they beat the old systems that America produces. If you wanted to defend against an American assault, you'd probably want to have some hypersonic missiles. Because look, if if Venezuela had a missile that could take a carrier out, they've got two sitting right offshore pretty much, and they could do that. Now, obviously, in a nuclear world, we want peace. We don't want war. We don't want to escalate. I don't think that's in the interest of anybody to do that. But when I'm going to spend my military money, I'm not going to buy American. Okay. If I'm anybody else in the rest of the world, why would you buy American? You wouldn't do it. So that's where we are. And can America learn from its economic military competitors like Russia and China in particular? Can we learn from them and catch up? Because Trump wants to catch up. He knows this. I mean, his people have told him this. This is part of what's in his national security strategy. He does have a sense that we don't have an Oreshnik, and we don't really have carrier battle group destroyers, missiles that can destroy us. We can destroy them. So he's been told and he understands, but realistically, we cannot catch up. So then the next thing is, well, can we leapfrog? Maybe, but probably not, because our military, the leaders, the scientists, the thinkers, and the system of acquisition is so, 1995 that it just, that you can't get anything creative out of that group. It doesn't happen. You need a complete paradigm shift, and that change comes outside of this old paradigm. But the old paradigm is still prevailing, and Trump is overseeing the last probably 5 or 6 years of that paradigm. And then he comes up with this Trump battleship, a nuclear powered battleship. So this is really kind of weak. It's kind of a sign of desperation. And that's where we are now. As Americans, nobody likes to hear this because we're like, oh my God, we spend all this money, but we can't do anything with it. And and we can't fix it. We have a system that keeps producing the same old, but it costs more and more. How do we change that? Well, that's our problem. And it's sad. It's unfortunate. But the rest of the world sees it and they go, okay, who am I going to buy my next generation this or that from? And it won't be the United States unless they are a lackey or some sort of dependent of the United States. And that's what Trump has done. And Biden before him is the same people, the same kind of people. What they did when we blew up Nord Stream, the Nord Stream 2, one of the pipelines, we damaged the other one, I guess took out one completely. Mm-hmm. When we did that, and I'm with Seymour Hersh, I think we did it. I have not seen a better story. So I think that one makes a lot of sense. So when we did that, it was part of a longer, more historical push to get Europe, particularly Germany and other European countries, to stop getting close to Russia economically, to stop buying Russia oil and gas, to buy our oil and gas. Because, we're also at the tail end of our fracking, our natural gas fracking episode. It's already over with, really. We're still producing it, but you remember when fracking was a big deal and we're going to frack and make all this natural gas in America? Well, we did that, but fracking is short-lived. It's kind of it's a short-term solution, and it's already peaked and is declining. But anyway, we wanted Germany and Europe to depend on America for everything that they need, as if we own them, as if we own the Atlantic. And we, just like we own NATO and we dominate NATO, we pay most of NATO is paid for by us. But what we want in return, and Trump actually says this openly, is we want you guys to contribute more. And part of how they're going to contribute is they're going to be dedicated and kind of controlled customer group for American products. But the problem is, I've been picking on the military side, but let's take about other American products that we can sell globally and be competitive with. Can you think of any? I mean,
weapons. Weapons is what we do. Whether they work or not is a different question, but that's what we have to
yeah, and those are only manufactured here by law. Anything else that has an American brand name on it, you can rest assured it was probably manufactured or assembled elsewhere.
That's right. And this is Trump's whole thing. His whole movement was about restoring the heartland, where the industrial capability had rusted away, it had collapsed. Education in this country had, the state-run education system hadn't delivered properly for so many people. And that was what people said, well, we got to fix America. So this is where his whole MAGA thing comes from. We're going to fix America. But he doesn't really understand what's wrong with America. So he's not fixing it. He can't fix it with what he thinks that he's fixing the wrong problems, and he's not fixing them. But he doesn't even, I think Trump and his people really haven't sat down and seriously thought about what is wrong. And most Americans actually know what is wrong. And that is, we're fighting everybody else's wars. We're picking fights where we don't need to. We have this massive, massive military expenditure that buys us nothing but conflict. And we have massive debt, because there's no discipline in Congress to not have massive debt. And we as people, who's going to say, no, I'm not going to cash this free money you gave me during COVID, or I'm not, that is, it's almost like human nature is being abused by Washington. In any case, you have leaders that are supposed to be above that. And we haven't had any leaders that are above that. We thought Trump might be. I think MAGA certainly thought Trump was going to fix it, but Trump doesn't understand what the problem is. And the people around him don't either.
Well, maybe we should turn to the Pentagon, because that was another place where I think Trump thought that there were problems. And we have Pete Hegseth there now, who just did a major address to all the generals. Well, how does that differ from the time that you were there? Do you know anything about what's going on sort of behind the scenes and there now? And what do you think of changes.
I don't know. Oh, Headseth. Yeah. Well, he's a fresh face. I'll give him that. He's young. He doesn't come from the normal military industrial complex where we have a general who goes and does a revolving door. All of his predecessors pretty much did it like that. Um, Even Rumsfeld, who was the one I remember the clearest, but I remember we had other secretaries of defense that were more, some of them were reform minded or scientific minded, and they understood the acquisition system better. Hedseth, I'm not sure what he understands, but his experience has been very much, in army operations or whatever he did for a short period of time. So he's on what they call the pointy end of the spear. And that's fine because there is some good perspectives that can come out of that, right? And usually that perspective is that your leadership is an idiot. Okay.
Go slow, don't send the troops out there willy-nilly, right?
Yeah, and I think Hegseth did bring that to the table in the sense that the way we've been doing things isn't very smart. The problem is, it's a major, complicated, corrupt system, and it is corrupt. It's financially corrupt, as we know. They can't pass audits. Why can't they pass audits? Why couldn't they pass 8 in a row audits? And why were they not even being audited for 30 years? Why? Well, because they can't pass audits. Because if they pass audits, people will go to jail. So obviously, how do you keep your best friends out of jail? Well, you just turn in whatever and hope you could get another chance next year. But they're not serious about it. From Hedgeseth's perspective, he should have been really good about that, because when government and military Pentagon waste happens and bad decisions are made, the people at the bottom pay the price with their lives. And Hegseth, I mean, I could be quoting Hegseth when I say that, because Hegseth understands that, but he does not have the capacity, and he hasn't surrounded himself with people that have the capacity to really change anything. So what he's done is, they did produce a national security strategy. It was much shorter than before. It laid off Russia a little bit, backed off of a 2-front war intention, which was never real. I mean, it was a funding tool, not a we were really going to do that. We would never be capable of doing that. But they're not talking about stupid ideas of the past anymore. So there's some changes in attitude, but very small. The big change would have been, the U.S. doesn't need to be the number one ruler of the planet. We're not capable of doing it. We can't afford to do it. We haven't been successful when we've tried to do it, and the American people don't want to do it. So why are we doing it? And they didn't change any of that in the national security strategy. Same thing as, we will be primary. We will be the primacy. Force primacy will belong to the United States, and we'll demonstrate it in the Western Hemisphere, and we'll take on China if we want to, and anybody else that we want to deal with, we'll do it. And that's fantasy. That keeps the money rolling. And Hegseth isn't the person to do it. And, if you remember, when we had Rumsfeld, very hateful, terrible person. I had very little respect for him. Egotistical to the max, probably rivals Trump in terms of his ego. But he was the kind of guy that he could figure out problems, and he would take in information that he didn't like and then figure out how to make it work for him. And that's very different than somebody that just says, tell me what I want to hear. And if I hear something I don't understand or I don't like, I'm just going to act like I didn't hear it. And that's the way the Trump administration does it. And I think Hegseth, I'm not sure what he hears or doesn't hear, but he is not equipped to really solve the problem. And it's not just the Pentagon, because obviously, this is what Elon Musk said when he left. He said this whole thing with Doge, trying to just make things more efficient, and trying to track down where money is in the government. It's an impossible task. It really can't be done. So we have a big problem. And I'm a libertarian, so I think that part of the problem is, I think the size and scope is just unmanageable, and there's a lot of little pockets for corruption. It's just like, if you leave your house, you got a whole bunch of tasty snacks and cookies in the cookie jar. You can tell your kids, look, I'm only going to be gone for a couple hours, but please, not to do this. Well, what really happens? Or it could be your dog. If you don't have a well-trained dog, don't get into that. And you come home, and what did the dog do? and that's just a small problem if you're not there constantly paying attention. But we have a massive problem with the Pentagon, and nobody's paying attention.
So it seems like, well, in Doge, they were trying to maybe extract some money, create efficiencies, and with that money, they just threw it at their problem, and we
Yeah,
have a bigger Pentagon budget as a result.
that's
Now, what does the national security strategy signal to you with respect to the role of neocons in the formulation of our foreign policy and national security strategies moving forward?
yeah. Well, I thought it my first thought was, and even with the second Trump administration, that he is a Zionist, no doubt, but at least in terms of neocon foreign policy advocates, he has pushed them away. He hasn't brought them in close to the administration. But I'm afraid that you can call them neocons, or you can call them aggressive internationalists, or whatever you want to call them. But when neocon became a pejorative, which it has become, and that's nice, right? I mean, it's we should reject neoconservative foreign policy for this country. It's inconsistent with our Constitution, and it pays no dividends.
Yeah.
But the people who are neocons, what they learned was, don't call yourself a neocon. I mean, seriously, was it the Heritage Foundation? One of the ones that did the big book for Trump, but Trump said they didn't do it for him, but whatever. He's copied a lot of ideas from them. Heritage was never known as a particularly neoconservative place. But where did the neoconservatives go when they left Washington, or weren't in their jobs anymore? They went to these same think tanks that are producing the same kinds of things. So again, it's a big system. It's hard to really to keep track of stuff. And of course, the solution is going to be, not any president will ever do this. I don't think any Congress will do it. But when the money blows up or collapses, when there is no more money to do these things, then it'll be a mad dogfight amongst government on who gets the money, and whichever one wins, they will shrink the government, because there's not enough. We don't have enough money in this country. We don't make enough things in this country to support the kind of government that we have. And this is the same thing we used to say about Europe and all the socialist and healthcare countries. Oh, well, how can they afford it? Well, no, actually, how can we afford what we're doing with our government? It's massive. It hasn't shrunk. Most people don't like it. Most people don't trust it. The directions that it chooses are really from the previous century.
So, Karen, that's probably a good place to end. You mentioned that you're active in libertarian politics.
Well, philosophically, I don't.
Philosophy,
Yeah.
you're close to the Ron Paul Institute, I think.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I've read that your name gets bandied about as a potential libertarian presidential
They
candidate.
say
That
that
maybe you're
so
not
much.
interested in.
It's people. Yeah. I'm not a believer in politics very much anymore. But yeah, I definitely, libertarian principles and solutions or offerings, they make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. Well, okay. So we talk a lot on this podcast, and I'm sure you do too, about what's wrong, and we can all identify what's wrong. But how does it end in a way that's not ending in tears? Like, do you see a light at the end of this tunnel? How do you think? What can people do to have a positive impact on things and to change this direction, which seems to be going to a dark place?
Yeah. Well, I think I don't think they should work for government. I don't think they should join the military. And I think that's the starting point. And I think they need to, people of all generations and ages, but depending on where they're at in their lives, they really should build a life for them, their families, communities, that is the least government dependent that they can have. And I say that because you can say, well, what if you're really poor and government has aid programs? They're great. And I'm not saying don't take them, but if you depend on that, you're depending on something that is fickle. And you're also selling part of your political freedom if you're dependent on a government paycheck. And of course, from the military, my whole military experience was with the volunteer force. And I remember, we got great literature out of Vietnam War. We got great poets, we got great movie makers, we got great novelists and writers and journalists. They came from that experience of having been sent somewhere against their will by a government that didn't know what it was doing, a government that lied, a government that betrayed them. But when I was in the military, if you didn't like something, if you saw something that was improper, wrong, illegal, wasteful, it doesn't matter what it is. You chose to be here. We're paying you to do what you're told. And that's a different way of handling things. And of course, the good people who didn't believe that they should be paid to do wrong things or improper things left the military. So it's a self-fulfilling, we have concentrated in our military a bunch of people, all kinds of people who really do not speak up because they've been cultured to, hey, you signed on, you got your bonus, we're paying you outstanding money, which they are, for what they do in the military. The military pay has totally surpassed civilian competitive pay, right? It's a good job for a lot of people that have limited skill sets. But there's a trade-off for that. And so I would encourage individuals, families, people, anybody you know, don't connect and make yourself dependent on government, because our government at the federal level, to some extent, various state levels, is increasingly unconstitutional. It is increasingly broke, meaning, if you're broke, you might get a second job. Our government gets broke, they borrow more money, and there's no limit to what they can borrow. And that goes on to you and your grandchildren, your children, whatever. So we should separate ourselves psychologically, spiritually, ethically from a bad government. And I think people on both sides of the aisle, or 3-4 sides of the aisle, whatever, MAGA, TDS people can all agree we got some bad government. So I would disconnect from that. Make sure I'm not dependent on that, because it's like the boat is sinking. It's going to sink. It's going to hit an iceberg. Probably already hit one. We don't even know. So that's the thing. And then what do? You build outside of that a system that works, whether it's a market system, skill system, international connection system. There's a lot of increased interest of Americans that have the money to do it, leaving the country. A lot of retirees, this has been going on for 20 years, where retirees are saying, I don't really like the tax situation where I'm at. I could go and take my limited Social Security and actually have a good retirement someplace else. So these are things we should think about. Can you fix the government? Well, if Elon Musk couldn't even budge the government into an efficiency direction, and he faced serious pushback at every level. I mean, people tried to destroy his business. He got in trouble with just, his reputation suffered. And all he was trying to do, I think, in his mind, not realizing what he was getting into, is that this should be pretty simple. It's not simple. If Elon Musk cannot do it, cannot even make a tiny bit of change, then I think you're kidding yourself if you think one or two, running for Congress is going to do it. Marjorie Taylor Greene found out that when she supported Trump, she gets pats on the head. And then when she said, wait a minute, this is wrong, they said, we're primarying you. And she's out. She ended her term early. And Thomas Massie, who is really just a wonderful, brave and bold person with a lot of character, they're doing everything they can to minimize and make him ridiculous. And he's not ridiculous, but how long will he put up with that? Because he doesn't have to live like that. He's actually has a place to go where he's off grid, completely independent. And he can, and I'm not saying go off grid, but I'm just saying he doesn't need Washington. Washington needs him. And if you think you can be a Massie or who's the guy that was with Massie on the Ro Khanna, if you can be one of these people who is willing to really fight hard, you might get an eighth of an inch. You might get a tiny toehold in making things better. So I think we really just have to, this may sound bad, but I don't believe in this government. I think the Constitution is good, but who upholds that? I mean, they're silencing people in this country. They're kicking them out because they wrote an op-ed that they didn't like. I mean, this is not the government. This is not a constitutional government. And I'm not saying it wasn't elected properly through various systems that we use, but that doesn't make it spiritually or ethically the America that I buy into, that my fantasy America. And maybe it is a fantasy, but yeah, people need to be independent from Washington. And that's a starting point. And then they need to be well informed. and they need to be extremely cynical. If the government is telling, and I think we learned this with COVID, unfortunately, the government would say things like, you have to wear a mask, and then the government people themselves would joke about it, and get a hot mic, oh, masks don't really matter. So we know our government lies, and even about more dangerous, things than masks. So I think we shouldn't believe our government. We shouldn't trust it. We shouldn't depend on it economically if we can avoid it. And we certainly shouldn't encourage our children to do that. And then we build our communities how we want to build them. And I think people live peaceably together, not because they have a strong, powerful government monitoring their every step so that they will behave properly. We live peaceably when we're not, there's law, rule of law. We're not hurting each other. We're not stealing from each other, and we're communicating with each other freely. I think that's, we have to, if peace is important, then we need to find it and build it. If you think a government is going to build peace, and this is back to, the EU, they seem to want war. The people of Europe do not want war, but their leaders want war. That is a lesson. I think this is our government's much the same. I don't, and it's sad. It's sad because I thought Trump might have been the one guy that might be a little different, but not the case.
Well, we had a lot more questions for you, Karen. There's a
I know, I
whole
talked
areas
too
of the
much.
world that we didn't cover with you that we really wanted to, and so we'll have to have you back again to talk
Sure.
more
Yeah.
about all your insights, and appreciate all your good advice.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is really a great conversation. You are so well informed on so many different areas that are of high relevance today. Hope to have you back soon, and all the best in 2026. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you.
Absolutely. Back, same thing to you. And really, I'd love to come back and we can talk other issues because there's a lot to talk about.
Indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.